The Indianapolis Colts have lost star running back Jonathan Taylor for at least 2 to 3 weeks. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Hello, everyone. I'm Zach Hicks of HorseshoeHuddle.com and obviously of the Locked On Colts podcast. You guys can find my work over there again at HorseshoeHuddle.com, where I do all my film stuff and really nerd out about this Colts team. We have a not so fun show today. You know, we're talking all about the Jonathan Taylor injury, and you guys kind of got a firsthand look on how difficult it is to run a daily podcast, because yesterday Jake and I get on here, we're all excited talking about how the Colts need to lean on their star running back the rest of the way, and how important it is for Jonathan Taylor to be the lead back down the stretch. And then 24 hours later, or not even 24 hours later, I mean, heck, when you guys listened to the podcast, it was 12 hours later, Jonathan Taylor is out for the next 2 to 3 weeks with a thumb injury. So we're going to talk all about the repercussions of that injury. Then we're going to talk about what the Colts offense will look like without their star player. Luckily, we've already kind of had a glimpse of that early in the season with Zack Moss leading the way, but we'll look more into that yet again. And then to close out today's show, we're going to talk about how the RPO game really might have saved this Colts offense. The Colts offense looked really anemic in those Patriots and Panthers games, but the RPO game came to life in this past game against the Bucs, and that might have saved this entire Colts offensive system. So to kick this off, though, we're talking Jonathan Taylor. We're talking about the star running back who missed the first, 6 games this season with that ankle injury that he was still recovering from in the offseason. He started the year on the PUP list. Again, a lot of speculation on whether that was a hold in or if that was an actual ankle injury still. By all accounts, Jonathan Taylor said his ankle still wasn't right. So we're going to put that down as the ankle injury still, but you guys can think whatever you want about that. So Jonathan Taylor missed the first 6 games this year with that ankle, comes back, plays fairly well. He gets ramped up to speed, plays some good football, coming off a really strong game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And now this thumb injury is going to sideline him for at least 2 to 3 weeks. We don't know exactly when it really happened in the game. I know there's been some people that have been showing me some screen grabs of like a moment in the third quarter where he was wincing in pain after a hit and some other things. One guy on Twitter I want to shout out here is Brent, fan of Nuance on Twitter. I'm sure you guys all know who he is. He messaged me, earlier in the week. I think it was on Sunday after the game or on Monday, talking about how the Colts running back rotation might have been influenced because in the second quarter, Jonathan Taylor was getting his hand wrapped. I don't know if that's exactly related to this thumb injury, but it makes sense that it would be related to this thumb injury. So Brent, big shout out there for pointing that out. I know Taylor didn't play a ton of snaps in the second quarter of this game, so that could have been when that thumb injury happened. But regardless, it doesn't matter when it happened or anything like that. That's just some semantics that we're talking here. Jonathan Taylor out at least 2 to 3 weeks. James Boyd of The Athletic is reporting that Taylor has undergone surgery or is about to undergo surgery for that thumb. And again, Jim Irsay talked about this with James in The Athletic, saying that the real concern right now is how well he's going to be able to grip the ball with that thumb. So they just want to get the surgery, get it taken care of, and get him back for those last, whatever it's going to be. I mean, if he comes back after 2 to 3 weeks, great. If he goes on IR and comes back after 4, not as great, but you still get him back. Or, knowing the Colts with the injuries this season, who knows when he's coming back. I mean, Braden Smith didn't go on IR and he missed like 6 weeks with his injury. Juju Brents didn't go on IR and he's already missed 5 weeks now. Jelani Woods is still on IR when we just thought it was a hamstring pull, and now it could be an entire season miss for Jelani Woods. So who knows when it comes to the Colts and on the injury front, but it does look like Jonathan Taylor is going to be out again at least 2 to 3 weeks with this thumb injury. And again, knowing the Colts, it could be the rest of the season. This is really unfortunate, obviously, for the Colts who are trying to make this playoff push. The Colts are sitting at 6-5 after a big win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're sitting right now at the 7th seed in the AFC playoff race, which is which is a playoff team now. I mean, that's the state of the NFL now. That's a playoff team, is that 7 seed. And Taylor was obviously a big catalyst of that win this past weekend. He had 91 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. In the fourth quarter alone, he had 6 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown, presumably with that bad thumb. So I don't know when that thumb injury happened. It could have happened on the very last run of the game. We don't really know exactly, but if it did happen earlier in the game, he had 6 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown in that fourth quarter to ice this past game with that thumb injury. So, you know what? Playing through that injury a little bit did help the Colts get that victory. But Jonathan Taylor is going to be missing some time. I don't think this drastically changes the Colts offense too much. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in segment 2, talking about the guy who's going to be replacing him. But it does change their immediate projection. Obviously, you know, this Colts offense has been changing the run scheme a little bit in recent weeks. They've been leaning more on gap and power stuff for Taylor. They've been getting him more involved. I mean, he's had what I'd say like 70 to 80% of the offensive snaps over the past 2 games. So he's been getting a ton of looks there in this offense. So this does change quite a bit for the Indianapolis Colts. And obviously when you lose a big time playmaker, your offense is going to suffer a little bit. I mean, again, we did a whole show on this yesterday talking about how the Colts were able to win this past game by leaning on Michael Pittman Jr. and leaning on Jonathan Taylor, and how going forward, that needs to be their approach. It's leaning on those 2 star players to carry them into the playoffs. Well, now they're down one of those star players. And can Zack Moss be one of those star players and replace Jonathan Taylor's impact in that way? Maybe. We'll talk about that more in segment 2, obviously. But, this is a big loss for a Colts team that is trying to push for that playoff spot. Anytime you lose one of your best players, it hurts. And especially with Taylor coming off such a big game, leading the Colts to victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But coming up, guys, we're going to talk all about the replacement, Zack Moss, who's still top 10 in the NFL in rushing yards. So this is no slouch coming in to replace Jonathan Taylor. We're going to talk all about Zack Moss and what impact he could bring to the Colts offense as a lead back yet again these next couple weeks. And guys, I need to shout out my favorite place ever on Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays, whatever it's going to be, and that is DoorDash. DoorDash is fantastic. I go to DoorDash all the time throughout the week. I mean, it can be a chain restaurant. It can be a local restaurant. I mean, here in Virginia, I have so many local restaurants I like to go to. Italian Delight is one of my favorite pizza places right down the road for me. I know that doesn't really apply to you guys, but Portillo's is a place I love in Indy. So there, I can bring it back home to you guys as well. Whenever I'm out there with Jake, I go to Portillo's and I just get the best sandwich in the entire world. And I don't even have to leave Jake's house. You know, I sleep in Jake's study all week whenever I'm out there getting ready for Colts camp or Colts games. And I can just order Portillo's right to my little office door that I have there in Jake's house. So I know you guys who are Indian natives know exactly what I'm talking about. Portillo's, it's a fantastic place. And DoorDash has me covered. I mean, they just bring it right to the door. I don't have to move. I can just continue working throughout the entire night. And that's what DoorDash does for you, man. It just brings it right to you. You don't have to go anywhere. It's just fantastic. So get prepared before game day or any day of the week and stock up on your favorite appetizers and order all your tailgate gear on DoorDash. Then get ready to watch your team win. That's what I do every single week. All your restaurant favorites from retail to grocery, they're all right there on the app, and you can shop and everything you need to get game day ready. That's 50% off, up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED23. Again, that's subject to change. Terms apply. Again, guys, go to DoorDash. Just the greatest app ever invented, honestly. I mean, I use it so much. Again, don't forget to use code LOCKED23 for 50% off, up to $10 value on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and spend $15 or more. Again, that's subject to change and terms apply. Also, guys, this show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the most fun I've ever had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. With the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league that's created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, if you want LeBron James and Travis Kelce at a combo of 10.5 3-pointers and receptions made, you can go to PrizePicks right now and put some money down on that. It's a really, really cool thing for people like you and me who just love multiple sports. You know, all year long, I'm watching basketball, I'm watching football, I'm watching hockey, you know, whenever those sports are playing. And now I can combine my 2 loves, or my 3 loves there over at PrizePicks. You want to play alongside with the PrizePicks favorite players too, like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz. You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app and view entries from some of the biggest names in PrizePicks community each and every week. And then PrizePicks also offers the greatest thing in daily fantasy sports, and that is the reboot policy, so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is officially rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. And Locked On Colts listeners, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to your first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, everydayers, we're continuing this conversation about the loss of Jonathan Taylor. Again, hopefully not a season-ending injury for him, but it does look like he's going to be out for a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks, according to James Boyd of The Athletic. The man who's replacing Jonathan Taylor is running back Zack Moss. Yet again, I mean, luckily/unluckily, I mean, however you guys want to view that, luckily or unluckily, the Colts have already had some experience seeing what Zack Moss can do as the main guy in this offense. He started not the first 6 games because he was injured in week 1, but he started 5 of the first 6 games with Taylor out. And even when Taylor was working his way back into the offense, Zack Moss was a prominent member of this running back room, and he even was the lead guy alongside Taylor there for a little bit. So Zack Moss steps into that spotlight role again. He's the main guy this year so far, 672 yards rushing on 4.8 yards per attempt and 5 touchdowns. So this is no slouch. I mean, this is a really, really good running back. Like, it's not like the Colts are bringing in some street free agent or some late round rookie guy to replace Jonathan Taylor. This is one of the better running backs in football this season, is coming in and playing alongside, or coming in and being that starter down the stretch. So again, you don't want injuries to ever happen, but if they're ever going to happen at any position, you want it to be at a spot where you have a guy like Zack Moss as the backup, where it's like, okay, we trust this guy. Like, it's not like at defensive tackle when Grover Stewart went down. It's like, okay, Eric Johnson, I guess you're up, and teams are going to average 8 yards a carry on us. It's really not that. It's okay, Jonathan Taylor's down. We lose some of that explosiveness and that speed, but we're still getting a guy who's averaging almost 5 yards a carry this season. And it's not like he's only done that with Anthony Richardson. I mean, this past game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he had 8 carries for 55 yards and looked really, really good on his couple carries in this past game. He's still 10th in the NFL in rushing yards, and that's with him not getting more than like 10 carries in a game in over a month at this point. I mean, it's really been the Jonathan Taylor show for the past month in this Colts backfield. And Zack Moss is still 10th in the NFL in rushing yards. He has the fewest amount of rushing attempts among all players in that top 10. So again, mathematically speaking, the highest yards per attempt of all of those players in the top 10 as well. And this week against the Tennessee Titans, the Colts are playing the Tennessee Titans on the road this week. Zack Moss was the lead guy the last time the Colts played them, and he had 23 carries for 165 yards and a touchdown in that game. So Zack Moss, more than capable running back. Like, you really can't complain about Zack Moss being out there. And I think when you look at what this offense is going to look like with Moss compared to how it looked with Jonathan Taylor, it's going to be much of the same. I mean, I think some of the running game changes a little bit. We've seen Shane Steichen lead more into some more gap and power and pulling linemen with Jonathan Taylor's return to the lineup. And I mean, I think you could see that on plenty of plays in this past game. The game sealing play, obviously, they had Quentin Nelson pulling around the outside with Jonathan Taylor falling behind for that big gain. A couple of other Jonathan Taylor big runs had, Will Fries or Braden Smith pulling around the outside. Because that's just where Jonathan Taylor thrives. He thrives more on that gap and power stuff on the inside, where Zack Moss is more of an inside zone, inside trap type stuff. That's where Zack Moss is going to thrive. So you'll probably see the Colts lean more into those inside zone type runs with Zack Moss and let him get downhill and kind of read that first cut and explode upfield like he's been doing all year. But for the most part, it doesn't really change too much. Who you have at running back doesn't really change the RPO game too much, doesn't really change just the overall feel and dynamic of this offense too much. If anything, it keeps a better pass blocker out there a little more prevalent. I mean, again, I'm not saying that Jonathan Taylor is such a liability in the pass protection game that he needs to come out, but he's close to that. I mean, he's close to that. Zack Moss is a really good pass blocking running back in the backfield, where Jonathan Taylor does have some struggles and limitations. So now you can kind of, if you're having Moss play like 90% of the snaps, then you're going to get a guy who can continually do both of those areas really at a really high level. Again, I mean, to reiterate, it sucks to lose Jonathan Taylor, especially when he was starting to look like Jonathan Taylor yet again. I mean, he was hitting those inside zone cuts at a really high level. He was following his blocks. He was looking decisive and smooth and calm. And I wrote a whole article about how the Colts need to lean on Jonathan Taylor. And I'm so upset how horribly that aged. But at the end of the day, if you're going to have an injury anywhere, let it be at the spot where you have someone as good as Zack Moss sitting behind them. It sucks. It really sucks. I feel like I say sucks on this podcast a lot because we had the whole show about Shaquille Leonard last week saying the same thing. Injuries are the worst, but having a player like Zack Moss behind definitely lessens the blow quite a bit. And you have a really quality player that's coming in that can do some really good things for your offense. So overall, I don't think this Colts offense can change too much with Zack Moss leading the way yet again. If you guys are big fantasy players, I mean, go to fantasy football, and if Zack Moss got dropped in your league for whatever reason, grab him as quick as possible because he's going to be a must-add going forward because the Colts are going to lean on him. Zack Moss is that capable of a player. They're going to give him a lot of touches. They're going to let him have the ball, and he's going to do some good things for this team. So, I'm excited for Zack Moss. I would rather see Jonathan Taylor out there, obviously, but I'm excited for Zack Moss. Really good player who's been doing some good things. And, hey, now he has a chance to get to 1,000 yards on the season, which would be a really great benchmark for him. So we'll see what he can do again with some more starts under his belt. But I'm excited for Zack Moss. I think he's a really good running back who's doing some great things for the Indianapolis Colts. But coming up, guys, we're going to shift away from this running back conversation. We're going to dive into the Colts offense at a more schematic level and talk about how a slight change to how the Colts approach this past game might have saved their offense for the rest of this season. But first, guys, when you guys are hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. I've been on both sides of the interviews, guys. I've been hiring. I've been obviously getting hired in my life. And I know the number one place for all of those things is LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows what small businesses are wearing. That knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and that might not have the time or the resources to hire. But thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They even just launched a new feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. That's so clutch right there. That is a huge thing right there, helping you write those job descriptions to find the best qualified candidates for your job. So again, post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, guys. So you guys know whenever Jake is not on the show with me, we dive into some really nerdy schematic talk about the Indianapolis Colts, and that's exactly what I'm about to do today. So we're going to dive into this Colts offense. Now, going into this past game against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, again, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, not the greatest overall defense in the league, one of the worst pass defenses, a pretty solid run defense, but again, those numbers get skewed a little bit when you're so bad against the pass that teams don't have to run the ball against you. But I digress. That's not the main point of this conversation here. The main point of this is the Colts offense was struggling quite a bit going into this past game. I mean, against the Panthers and the Patriots, in those two games combined, the Colts only scored 23 total points. They couldn't run the ball. Their passing game was really erratic and just not effective. So the Colts really faced two major issues going into this past game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was, how do we get defenders out of the box so we can actually run the ball? And how do we fix Minshew being erratic and not in control? And at the end of the day, just not comfortable. Gardner Minshew was just not comfortable whatsoever against the Panthers or the Patriots, and the Colts offense was not operational. There was a really low success rate, and they were not moving the ball. So how were the Colts going to combat that? How were they going to get players out of the box and open up the pass game and get Gardner Minshew more comfortable in the pocket? And the answer was these three simple letters: RPO. RPO. Now, for all you people who know what that term means, or at least have heard that term 1,000 times, but maybe don't fully understand it, an RPO is a run pass option. So it's a run design play with the passing option on top of it. So it's a bit like a read option in terms of the quarterback is making a choice on every single snap, but instead of it being like a read option where, you either hand the ball off to the running back or running it yourself, your options are hand it to the running back or pull it and throw it to your one read wide receiver based on what the conflict defender is doing. So the quarterback is staring at one defender right as the ball is snapped and seeing how that defender is moving, which will dictate what he's going to do with the ball. If he's going to hand the ball off, or he's going to throw it to a wide receiver or a tight end or whoever it's going to be. So this is something that's really prevalent at the college level because offensive linemen are allowed to block 4 yards down the field before a pass is thrown. In the NFL, they can only go 1 yard down the field before a pass is thrown or it's a legal man downfield. So RPOs are not as prevalent at the NFL level, but we do see some teams like the Indianapolis Colts, like the Philadelphia Eagles, lean heavily into the RPO game. And what we really saw in this past game with the Colts is every single run was an RPO in this one because they wanted to give Minshew those options. And this is something that Minshew's been operating really well throughout his entire career, going all the way back to high school and his early college days. Gardner Minshew may not be the best drop back passer, but he's a really efficient and effective RPO passer because he is so good in those one read plays. He is so good in one read plays. He's really good at changing his arm angle. He's really good at being decisive. He's really good at just getting that ball out of his hands before obviously the offensive lineman goes down the field. So he's just really good in those RPOs. So the Colts really did some self-evaluating. And this is really just great props to Shane Steichen yet again, where he really did some self-evaluating. It's like, okay, how do I fix these two major issues? How do I get Gardner Minshew more comfortable? And how do I get defenders out of the box so I can actually run the ball again? Well, the answer is put Gardner Minshew in a system or in this one type of scheme, this one type of play that he is so effective and efficient at that will also lessen the box the more that he hits on those passing plays. So we saw the start this past game. The Colts came out throwing the ball so much empty personnel, which doesn't really go to my argument here, but it was part of the game plan. And a lot of RPOs where Minshew was just pulling the ball out and throwing it to a receiver, throwing it to a tight end, and getting chunk gains in the passing game on those RPOs. Now, again, RPOs are run plays by design with just a slight pass option behind it to keep a defense honest. But if a defense is going to keep 6, 7, 8 guys in the box, your quarterback's going to pull those every single time so he can hit that quick wide receiver and get the ball up the field and get some chunk plays. And we saw it on a couple plays to like Will Mallory had a couple of RPO catches in this one. Michael Pittman Jr. had a couple RPO catches in this one. Pittman Jr.'s big 4th and 1 conversion was on an RPO catch. So that's really how you lessen that box is, look, if a defense is going to crowd the line of scrimmage and bring everybody up around the line and dare you to throw it, well, you can still call a run, but if you have your quarterback pull it out and throw it real quick, then you can get one of your playmakers in space with a lot of room to move and get upfield for big productive gains. And that keeps your offense on schedule. So what we saw in this past game was a Gardner Minshew who was less erratic, not saying he wasn't erratic at all. He was still fairly erratic at times, but he was far less erratic than what we've seen in recent weeks. We saw Gardner Minshew who was making better decisions at the line of scrimmage. We saw a more effective, efficient, operational, and much more successful offense from this Indianapolis Colts team. They were able to move the ball at will. I mean, they didn't finish every drive, but they were able to actually move the ball in this game. And also as a result, we saw the run game finally open up. Again, it might not have been as many carries as we would want. You probably want maybe 30 plus carries in a game like that where you're running the ball so well. But if that RPO game is going, I mean, look, Shane Steichen probably called around 35 runs in this game. I'd have to go back and chart every single call, but if you count RPOs as runs, which they are run plays, Shane Steichen probably called 35-ish runs in this one, but the Colts only had 23 because Minshew was pulling a lot of them to throw it to wide open receivers who can make plays happen in the open field. So the offensive scheme really relied on Gardner Minshew doing something that he's been doing since he was, in high school. doing something that he's been effective at for his entire career. And it's a very simplistic thing. It's extremely simplistic. That's what RPOs are. It's a one read thing. He's reading one defender, pulling the ball or handing the ball off based on that one defender. But because this is one thing that he's really, really good at, he was able to be more comfortable. The box was able to lessen up. The Colts were able to run the ball, and they were able to have a lot of success in all areas of their offense in this past game. So for all the people out there thinking, this Colts offense is doomed because what do you do with Gardner Minshew at quarterback? He's struggling as a drop back passer right now. He's been erratic in the pocket. He's got happy feet back there. He's making some poor decisions. How do you make this Colts offense operational again? And for Shane Steichen, his self-scouting in the bye week was, let's lean on the RPOs. It's something he's good at. It's something that's not too difficult or tricky for our offense. And it's a way to just keep the offense moving. We're not going to have 2-play drives like this, but you're going to have sustained 8, 9, 10-play drives that can get you some points and get you some conversions for first downs and keep the ball on the field for your offense. And that's all I was really asking in those Panthers and Patriots games was, let's just get this offense operational again. They're not going to have this high octane offense with Gardner Minshew, but if you can just get this offense operational and kind of moving under him, that's fine. That's enough to get in the playoffs with this schedule the Colts have. So if they can continue to lean on RPOs, lean on empty set stuff, and then obviously build off the RPOs like they did this past game where they were throwing in a lot of play action pop passes, where these play action pop passes, they were still just one read plays, but they were play action by design. They didn't really have that run option where Minshew was able to pull it out and hit a quick hitter over the middle for a long gain. I mean, the Marley Cox catch was obviously a play action pop pass. Michael Pittman Jr. had a quick slant, I think, in the second quarter that was on a play action pop pass over the middle where it's like, hey, one read route or whatever, just get that ball out quick on play action. But it's built similarly to the RPO without the run option, if that makes sense. It's a play action play that looks like an RPO essentially. But all this to say that the Colts offense, I'm not saying it's completely saved because RPOs are fairly volatile and sometimes they're just not going to work for your offense, but this is at least a solution to the problem that we saw in those Panthers and Patriots games. It's showing that this Colts offense is able to evolve to problems where they looked at this and they said, look, Gardner Minshew needs something to feel comfortable again. And they said, let's lean on the RPO game again. Let's lean on the RPO game and see what it can bring us. And as a result, the Colts were able to have a really successful operational offense against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So we'll see if that continues going forward against somewhat better defenses, still not better teams overall, but better defenses going forward, and see if the Colts offense can remain operational down the stretch and get them into the playoffs. But that's all I have for you guys today. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur, and at Valen, at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll see you guys back here bright and early tomorrow morning.